this story is difficult to cover in a way that does not come off as dismissive of a very real problem, because bad actors have tried to weaponize a real problem, exaggerate it in order to make it sound a lot more widespread in general than it is in reality, and then use it as justification for a political motive, a political endpoint. And of course, like with many other movements the right has pushed in the past, if you try to point out inaccuracies in their claims, they start to fall back on the idea that you are defending insert awful thing. Many political groups do this, but in this case, it is British conservatives. You may be familiar, if you're from the UK, with a big report that just came out on grooming gangs in the UK. Europe's really weird. I've heard this phrase a lot about specifically Europe for years now. Grooming gangs. Like, gangs of people who groom children? It sounds like a made-up thing almost, but apparently they're real. Grooming gangs are a real thing, apparently, which is very bizarre. It sounds like it's like razor blades and Halloween candy level insidious on its face, right? But this report that just came out makes the claim that hundreds of thousands of children have been trafficked and abused by grooming gangs in the UK for like 70 years, all the while UK institutions have supposedly covered it up intentionally or on accident through lack of competence. Now, at face value, I saw this report, and it is long. It is a big, long report. Of all people, and I do have to give him credit because he did actually do it, Asmongold read the whole thing on stream, and it took him nearly 8 hours. It is long. But what I do have is a summary and response to this report. Because while I could go down the whole 8 hours of the report, most of it is fluff. Most of it is fluff and isn't really useful for anything besides, well, here are some awful stories. A lot of it is testimonial. But insofar as trying to extrapolate, is there a greater problem here, the vast majority of it just kind of fluffs it up. There's not a lot of data in there. But of what there is, when it does reference data, it's very tenuous. The reality is, this massive viral report takes a select group of real stories, tells them, and then extrapolates the real criminal data and makes assumptions based on the belief that most of the cases of child grooming must have never been reported, then tries to predict what the actual rate of grooming gang victims really is, and that big hundreds of thousands of children number is that assumed number. The reality is that number comes from nothing but a guess. And if you don't believe me, let's look into the BBC's story on this report. The key takeaways from Grooming Gangs Report. A review into abuse carried out by grooming gangs in England and Wales has been published. The government asked Baroness Casey to carry out the audit, examining existing data and evidence on the nature and scale of group-based child sexual abuse in January. Here are some of its key findings and recommendations. Lack of reliable data. The report highlights flaws in data collection, which it says means it is not possible to assess the scale of the issue. It cites the complex and organized child abuse dataset, which identified around 700 recorded offenses of group-based child sexual exploitation in 2023, saying this is the only figure on group-based child sexual exploitation. The report says that this is highly unlikely to reflect the true scale of the issue, given this crime is underreported and suffers from confusing and inconsistently applied definitions. This part of the claim is true. Unfortunately, they then decide to make up a true number because they assume they know an idea of how many cases of child grooming must have happened that were never reported, which is a really improper way to go about handling a case this serious, I feel, or an issue this serious. What I want to know is, they're saying shit like, there are thousands of these gangs, bro, where are they hiding, like, for 70 years? It's it's not anywhere near as widespread of a problem as the right is making it out to be. There is a reason why all of the people pushing this are the same people who want any non-white immigration barred from the West. Like, this is because of a political goal. They are trying to get people on board with white nationalism because we have to do it to protect the children from being groomed by Muslims. That is their claim. Ethnicity of perpetrators. One key data gap highlighted by the report is on ethnicity, which is described as appalling and a major failing. It says the ethnicity of perpetrators is shied away from and is still not recorded in 2/3 of cases, meaning it is not possible to draw conclusions at a national level. They even admit that they don't actually gather ethnicity and race data on sexual crimes in most cases, meaning they wouldn't even be able to go off of anything, really, to figure out how many cases have really happened. All they can do is guess. Calling out that there is an undercounting happening, obviously, I guess technically it's true, but also, why is the ethnicity of perpetrators important? Like, genuinely, do these people believe that, like, brown people are more likely to be pedophiles just because they're brown? It's interesting of a claim, but okay. I guess that's where the government is at right now, in the UK. However, the report says there is enough evidence from police data in 3 areas, Greater Manchester, South Yorkshire, and West Yorkshire, to show disproportionate numbers of men from Asian ethnic backgrounds among suspects for group-based child sexual exploitation. That's right, they assume based on the data from these 3 areas and apply it to the entire country, and those are the numbers they get. Hundreds of thousands of children. It adds that a significant number of perpetrators of Asian ethnicity identified in local reviews and high-profile prosecutions across the country also warrants further examination. The report says more effort is needed to explore why it appears perpetrators of Asian and Pakistani ethnicity are disproportionately represented in some areas. In response, the government has said it will make it a formal requirement to collect both ethnicity and nationality data for all cases of child sexual abuse and exploitation, as well as commission new research into the cultural and social drivers of the issue. Suspects, i.e. racist profiling. It is kind of crazy that now the UK is openly saying, okay, all right, racists, we will start collecting race and crime data so that we can try to find out whether or not brown people are more prone to hurt children, and then we can act on it. Like, that's kind of crazy that is now the public position of the UK. Like, y'all Britmongers are calling us fascist, and y'all are preparing to start, like, culling the brown people over there. That's what's about to happen in the UK, apparently, because Jesus Christ. You've got Americans jumping on board with this, too. Like, Asmongold, his video reading this rape report for 8 hours has nearly 2 million views. The review also notes a significant proportion of live cases appear to involve suspects who are non-UK nationals or claiming asylum in the UK. The government said it was bringing forward changes so anyone convicted of sexual offenses would have their asylum claim rejected and be denied refugee status. I agree with that. That seems reasonable. National inquiry. Over the weekend, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, very, very right-wing, accepted the report's recommendation that there should be a full national inquiry into child sexual exploitation in England and Wales. The PM had previously dismissed calls for a national inquiry, arguing the issues had already been examined in a 7-year investigation by Professor Alexis Jay, which concluded in 2022. Instead, the government commissioned Baroness Casey's review and unveiled plans for 5 local inquiries to be held in Oldham and 4 other areas yet to be named. However, Baroness Casey said she changed her mind on the need for a national inquiry after being duly unimpressed that more local councils did not volunteer to set up their own inquiries, and some organizations were reluctant to talk to her own investigators. Her report recommends both a national police operation to review cases of child exploitation not acted on, as well as a national inquiry. It says this would be overseen by an independent commission with full powers to compel witnesses to provide evidence and should be time-limited and targeted. The inquiry would require cases of failures by local services to identify areas where investigation should be instigated and coordinate a series of targeted local investigations. I'm sorry, I have so much I want to say that it's making me trip up my words here. This entire situation reeks of weaponizing a real issue for political gain. in a really shameless and disgusting way. Don't get me wrong, there is probably a pretty high likelihood there's a disproportionate amount of sex crime being done by certain groups of immigrants or refugees throughout Europe, because from what I understand, throughout parts of Africa and the Middle East and Asia, there are some pretty bad, pretty misogynistic cultures that people come from, and I've, at least anecdotally speaking, seen a lot of videos where, like, immigrants in Europe will, like, harass and accost every woman they see, particularly white women, right? So there is an element of actual social friction that is happening between non-white and white people in Europe right now, and some of it is, like, real issues that happen on a case-by-case basis, but it feels like the goal of this is to give the government justification or manufacture justification for the government to start identifying non-white people as a serious criminal threat to society. The implication in the report is that it's like a widespread cult with a satanic leaning, but also Muslim, that are seeking to darken our children. It's insane. Oh yeah, the report itself concludes that, like, we need to crack down on non-white, like, Muslim immigration in the UK. Oh, and of course, the report also recommends tightening the law in England and Wales so adults who have sex with a child under 16 are always charged with rape, calling on society to see children as children. I do appreciate this. The UK has really fucked up laws when it comes to what is and isn't considered rape, particularly when it comes to men. They might have changed this, but at least up until recently, but it might still be the case, men could not be legally raped in the UK unless it was by another man, because, like, rape was considered when one person inserts their penis unwantedly into another person. And so a woman, legally speaking, could never rape a man unless, I guess, she was a trans woman. So yeah, the UK's had some pretty backward definitions of some of these words for a while now. Taxis have previously been identified as a way children can be at risk of sexual exploitation, both as a potential way for perpetrators to meet their victims as well as traffic them to different locations. Taxi licenses are issued by local authorities, but the report points out that some areas are much more stringent in their processes to protect children. Hey chat, you know what would be really crazy? What about the race of the children? That's my question. I know we're talking a lot about the race of the perpetrators, but I'd be really, really curious. Do you think it's mostly white, native kids being trafficked by these grooming gangs? Or do you think it's mostly refugee and immigrant children being trafficked and abused by these grooming gangs? The most vulnerable of children. We don't know because there isn't any data on it. We don't know. But if I want to do what this inquiry did, I could just say, I bet that's the case. I bet that's the case. And honestly, I bet it is. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if it turned out the majority of the victims aren't white kids. That this isn't some brown people are coming here and they're abusing white kids, native-born white kids. This is probably more likely a case of families abusing each other's children that have, like, in very small communities and enclaves with hyper-conservative enforced ideals. That would probably be the case. That would probably be what's likely. That's how it tends to go here in America. Anyway, there's a lot more that we could talk about with this report because it makes a lot of really extreme claims, but at the end of the day, like 90% of it is just a bunch of individual people's stories told in the most heart kind of wrenching way possible, because they are horrific stories of child abuse, and, you know, any human being would hear it and be like, oh my god, we gotta do something about these people, you know, because that's just the reaction you have to that kind of thing. That's just how people are. But it really feels dirty to me to just, I don't know, try to twist the data, not actually to make up data, try to twist real stories and create a narrative that can only serve to try and demonize a particular ethnic group of people. Because we're not demonizing the act here, we're trying to find a way to associate the act of an evil action with an ethnic group. Why would we want to do this if not for some pretty bad reasons? I don't know. That's just my 2 cents. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and a comment down below. It really helps a lot and is massively appreciated. Subscribe if you want to see more from me. Ring the bell icon to turn on all notifications so YouTube actually tells you when I upload or go live in the future. follow my social medias, and of course, I hope to see you again in the next one.